I remember sitting on the floor of my living room, toys scattered, laptop on my knees, and I was thinking, how can I possibly keep doing this? Have 4 children, had full-time leadership role, and what felt like zero breathing room. If you have ever found yourself asking, do I need to quit just to get my life back? This episode is for you. Hi everyone, my name is Limor Bergman Gross. I'm an executive coach for women in tech. I'm the host of From a Woman to a Leader and a former director of engineering who knows exactly what it means to juggle leadership and life. And in the episode today, I talked to Kathryn Sollmann, and she's the author of the 4 Jobs Club and Ambition Redefined. She's a powerhouse advocate for helping women navigate work and caregiving without burning out or checking out. And Kathryn shares hard-earned wisdom on why stepping out of the workplace isn't always the answer, even when it feels like it, how top C-suite women manage the 4 jobs without outsourcing everything, and how to avoid trading a 30-year career for a 30-day crisis. We also get real about invisible labor, asking for help, the myth of doing it all, and being a role model for your kids by staying in the game. So if you're a woman in tech or leadership wondering how to keep it all together, or what's even worth holding on to, this is a must listen. So if you're ready for clarity, courage, and permission to write your own rules, stay with me here. Are you ready? Let's dive right in. Hi, Kathryn. How are you?
Hi, Limor. How are you?
I'm pretty well. Welcome. Super excited to have you here today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about your new book, The 4 Jobs Club. And before we do, I wanted to ask you kind of what inspired you to write it.
Well, I have been working with women since 2002. I did a career pivot and started helping women return to the workforce. And that's after they had time home with family. And then that morphed into helping women through various ages and stages in and out of the workforce. But then I really put my stake in the ground and said, women really should always work. And that is something that I say very unapologetically, because as a career coach, I see a lot of women who have had what I call life you never knows happen to them. It could be that they were home for a while and their husband lost a job, or they got divorced, or someone got sick, or whatever. Lots of things, as we know, happen in life. And I believe that working is an insurance policy for women. We insure our house and we insure our cars, and there's no reason we shouldn't insure our financial security.
Mm-hmm.
I was just reading a study actually by Bank of America that said that 94% of women believe that at some point in their lives, they will be solely responsible for their own finances. Yet, quite a few women leave the workforce, and I have seen it for an average of 12 years.
Yeah.
That is a lot of time that you take away from your career progression, your salary progression, and the ability to earn, save, and invest. So I wrote the book because I was seeing women still leaving the workforce. And I started thinking, well, okay, that's true, but look at all the women who are at the top, the C-suite women,
Yeah.
their mothers too. They have households, they have aging parents. So how did they do it? And I really wanted to find out what their tips and tricks and strategies are. And in a survey that I did, I found out that women at the mid-level to, like just below the senior level really feel like senior level women are not helping them enough and showing them, this is how I did it. This is how you can manage the 4 jobs and stay in.
That's very interesting. And to be honest, Kathryn, I first of all, I share the same opinion with you. I live in Israel. So in Israel, I don't know, maybe that's because of the financial situation. It's very difficult to live out of one paycheck. So most women do work. But when I moved to the US, so I moved with 4 very young kids at the end of 2010. And I remember that at the area, where I lived, I saw so many women. Most of them are well-educated women. that are stay-at-home moms. And I was actually very surprised to see that they were just, it's not that I judged them, but I was just surprised, like why there's so many women. That I have 4 children and I always worked. I always went to work. So why there's so many women that just do that, stop everything and stay at home?
Yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing. So, in this same Bank of America study, 74% of the women who stayed home at one point said they didn't regret it. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, obviously, they were spending time with their families and they, view it as important time, and you and I are not going to judge them about that. We love spending time with our families.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. When women decide for whatever reason that they feel that they need to be with their children 24/7. It could be for 1 year, 5 years, or the average 12 that I see. What they're not really thinking about is that if they run out of money at some point in their lives, and again, 94% feel that they are going to be solely responsible at some point. So if they run out of money at some point in their lives, it's those very same children that they feel that they need to stay home 24/7 with, who are going to be burdened by the fact that they run out of money. And that's what women aren't thinking about. We all live longer. A lot of us are living longer than we ever thought we would. Our parents are living longer than they ever thought they would. And it's a very long life that has to
Yeah,
be funded.
for
So
sure.
I feel very strongly that, there are many ways to work. There are many ways that work can fit your life.
For sure, I agree with you. And I would also say that what I did notice that, when the kids are very small, obviously you're so busy, like you're struggling to. I was struggling like to breathe, like back then. But they grow up very quickly. And then you find yourself in a meaningless life. At least that's from my perspective. Okay, I'm not judging anyone, but like, okay, what now? What am I going to do with myself? Like, the kids don't need me anymore. Or maybe they do need me for money or stuff like that. But like, they don't need me to do all the things I used to do with them. So it's even more than money. It's about
Purpose.
being, yes, having some purpose. Exactly, Kathryn. Okay, so let's dive in. You interviewed a lot of women. What did you find out from those executives that you talked to?
Well, people that look at my book can see that I interviewed 50 C suite women. And there can be an immediate assumption that, well, you interviewed the women at the top and they're making big salaries. And so they can afford to outsource everything. And sure, they can manage the 4 jobs. And what I found is that they are not throwing money at the 4 jobs. I mean, sure, they can outsource, but they're not outsourcing like crazy people. They're not Sheryl Sandberg having hot and cold running helpers. What what they're doing is they're throwing organization at the 4 jobs. So basically, they are bringing their business skills home and they're kind of thinking like project managers about all the various things that need to be done to run the family and run the household. And they have systems and processes, not becoming automatons by any stretch of the imagination, but really putting that organizational layer onto their thinking. And what I found is that these women who are CEOs or CFOs or whatever, they are going to the grocery store and cooking dinner and doing laundry and driving kids here and there. Eh, they're pretty much doing everything that you and I are doing. It's just that they are extremely organized. And if they're
Uh-huh.
not if they're not inherently organized, they learn how to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. So first of all, they are normal people like us, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
not like different kind of human beings.
Yeah. Well, and I do think that the women who do have many, many helpers, I think that's a little bit more in the U.S. It's a little bit more like on the both coasts. There may be the tech industry on the West Coast and Wall Street on the East Coast. I see more of that in those communities. But there's a lot of miles in between the coasts and where people are, just very earnest and humble and going through the 4 jobs just like we do.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 4 jobs. Let's maybe talk about what they are first, just to make sure that everyone that listens to us understand what we are talking about.
So the 4 jobs, you have your paid job, and then you have 3 unpaid jobs in addition that you're juggling at the same time. And that is caring for kids, caring for aging parents, and caring for your household.
Hmm.
And lots of women have all 4 jobs at the same time, or a lot of them will have the 3 jobs and they're sort of looking ahead to a time when, their aging parents may need them. But it's a lot, as we know. And as we can talk about that men have become more enlightened than their fathers were, but endless studies have shown that the responsibility for those 4 jobs really is still primarily on the shoulders of women. I do think men are doing more than their fathers did, but women still haven't worked it out to make it more equal.
Yeah, depending on, I guess it depends on the the.
Yeah, it does. It does depend on the couples, but there are enough women who really have most of it on their shoulders.
Agreed.
And one of the other things that I learned in the book is that helping is not helpful. So when you're talking about, dividing and conquering in your household, it's not helpful to have a spouse or partner who is constantly coming to you and saying, "How can I help?" Because that's sort of one off and it's not owning anything. What you
Yeah,
want is a partner who is going to own certain tasks so that you can take part of that mental load of the 4 jobs away and you can say, "All right, these 3 things or these 5 things, I'm not going to worry about because I know my partner
yeah,
is owning that and taking care of it and isn't going to be showing up and saying, how can I help? Or, what do I do with this? Or, whatever."
yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is upon us women to maybe give that responsibilities, right? I mean, not take everything on ourselves, but share the responsibilities with our
Right.
spouses.
You can't, as you say, I mean, you can't expect your partner to be a mind reader.
For
So
sure.
you have to try to work it out. Another book that it would be great for your listeners to know about if they don't already is it's called Fair Play. And this is a book that is based on a system that the author Eve Rodsky created. And she created 100 cards that are all of the tasks that are in a household, in a family, the 100 most usual, typical tasks.
Hmm.
And you can actually sit down with your partner and dole out the cards. And you can say, "Okay, I do this, you do that. What's going on at this moment? This is what I do, this is what you do." And inevitably what's going to happen, it's a visual that your cards are going to be up here and your partners are way down low. And it really it's a great visual that shows your partner that yes, it is an equal. And it's never going to be, perfectly equal, but it can be more equal.
Absolutely. And we're not looking for perfect in life
Right.
in general, right? We're never perfect. So,
Right.
Catherine, maybe share some of your favorite tips from your book.
Well, my favorite tip of all came from the CFO of uh, Steel. And she talked about how women will come into her office and say, "You know what? I am reeling at a breaking point. I don't know if I can continue to do this. And I need to go home for a while and take a hiatus and get things in order. And then, maybe in a year or so, I can return." And so at first, this CFO figures out if there's anything dire going on at home. I mean, obviously, if there's something really bad, then you need to go home.
Yeah.
But more times than not, it's not something dire. And it's something that is probably solvable. Maybe not that minute, but could be solved if you really put your mind to it and do some research about what your resources are. So what this woman says is she says, "Don't let a situation that could potentially be solved in 30 days, upend a career that could bring you benefits for 30 years. And if you really think about it, when you've got the four jobs coming at you constantly, 24/7, there are times when you're completely stressed out and you're also very emotional. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Um, but when you're in that more emotional, stressed out state, you're not thinking, well, maybe I could try this, maybe I could try that. You're not in your most resourceful state. And maybe what you have to do is take a week off and just explore all the resources that you might have to solve the problem. One woman talked about her son was having a terrible time reading, and it's not the end of the world, but it was very upsetting for her and for her husband. And they were, trying to figure out ways to help him. And when she finally just sort of slowed down and started researching various resources, she found that her own company subsidizes tutoring for employee children. And she had no idea. And she was at the senior level. So there are all kinds of resources, but sometimes we just need to take a deep breath and give ourselves some time to really think through how to solve a problem. And the answer is not always going to be just leave the workforce.
Yeah, I love what you said about first of all, do not throw a 30-year career job for something that maybe can be solved in 30 days. And also yeah, in general, we don't make good decisions when we're under stress or if we're very emotional, right? I
Right.
mean, if we're triggered, either way, it can be like any kind of emotion. Probably not the best time to make decisions, especially decisions that can really impact our lives. And I think that one of the things that people think about when oh, how can I handle it all? They think about either I leave the job or I just let it consume me completely and pay some other people, right? I mean, like you mentioned Sheryl Sandberg, just pay a bunch of helpers and then I will not be present for my kids and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of at least what goes in my mind. And basically what you're saying, well, there may be a way.
There's a happy medium.
Yeah.
It's just, and part of it is learning to ask for help. Lots of times women think that being crazy busy is a badge of honor and that, you can do it all yourself. But most people can't do it all themselves. And you do need to ask friends and family and your colleagues and, just people in general to help you. And you make it known that you're going to help others too. But we can all help each other get through the four jobs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in general, what I've seen, and personally, we don't always feel comfortable asking for help. We feel very comfortable offering help, but less so asking for help.
Yeah, right. We do feel comfortable giving help, but part of it is also learning to say no. We tend to say yes to too many things. And I like to say you can say no with a plan B. So if somebody says to you, can you help me chair this fundraising committee? Well, you know that you have way too much on your plate to do that, and you really shouldn't say yes to that. And so, but you feel badly saying no. So, a nice thing and a way for you to feel good and for the person asking to feel good is to say, I really don't have time to chair the committee with you, but I would be willing to spend an evening calling lots of people that I know who are very philanthropic and see if they'd be willing to donate. And then you have a contribution, but it's not going to make you crazy.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you something. Kathryn, I had a call with a client last week, and she's really struggling with this back to office
Hmm.
kind of mentality that we go through, right? I mean, we had during COVID working from home, which made it easier. At least I can share that when I started working, in 2016, I started working fully remote and it really helped. So we have this kind of back to office theme that is happening in many companies. And she's saying to me basically, oh, now I have to commute an hour each direction because there's so much traffic and so forth. So what's your take on that? I mean, and literally, I mean, You mentioned those executives are very organized, but eventually, like if you have to spend 8 or 9 hours in the office, 2 hours in commute, how being organized is going to help you? Like, what do you do?
Well, I mean, it is still going to help you because, even if you do the 8 hours in the office and the 2 hour commute, the time that you're home is going to be more streamlined and more organized and whatever. I think that it's important to realize the value of being in the office. It's definitely hard for women to be in the office 5 days a week, but lots of women that I talk to, my own kids, just lots of people now are really in the office maybe once or twice a week. And that's much more palatable and easier to do. I think the value of getting out of your home office and being with other people and the collaboration and all of that, I think it's actually good for you. I realize it's a little more difficult, when it's a long commute, but what are you doing during that hour? Are you planning things that are going to ease your time at home, so that you can relax after dinner, planning out where your kids are going to camp or, whatever. It's all doable. I do feel badly for people that still have to go in 5 days a week,
Yeah.
but I think there are enough companies out there that are the hybrid.
I agree with you. I very much agree that like the interaction is important, and yeah, unfortunately for her, she needs to commute 5 days a week, so she'll have to figure out
Yeah.
if
Well,
this
she
is
has
some.
to decide, maybe she's going to find another employer that has, more flexibility that way. And then that is the wonderful thing that, it is possible to find other employers. But, the reality is finding another job is like having a fifth job. That's a big undertaking.
For sure, and especially if you have to go to the office every day, it's even harder.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what else, Catherine, is important for you to share that I haven't asked?
Well, I I really feel that women also need to think about the fact that they are role models for their children. And that's one of the things that came out in the book as well. It was so enriching to hear these women talk about how their daughters and sons were, very appreciative of them as role models and almost to a fault. I really didn't hear about any kids that weren't, going to an interesting school or on a path of studying something interesting or in interesting careers. Many of them followed their mother's path and, where they might have in other years followed the father's path. And many weren't even on a corporate path, but doing interesting things. And I just think that in a long lifetime, when a woman is showing her children the value of working and saving and investing and what that means for the family, for contributing to college educations, to, fun things like vacations, whatever, it just goes a tremendously long way in showing the value of women working.
Absolutely. Perfect. So before we end the call today, Catherine, tell our listeners kind of, about the work you do, other than the book, of course, and how can they find you?
Well, I'm a career coach as well as a writer and author, and you can find my book on Amazon and Goodreads and bookshop.org. And I also have a Four Jobs Club newsletter, which I'd love you to subscribe to, which is free, and
Perfect.
would love to stay in touch with all of you.
Perfect. I'll share everything on the show notes. I want to thank you so much, Catherine. It's been really a pleasure having you today.
Yes, pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the episode with Catherine. And before you go, if you found today's episode helpful or inspiring, please take a moment to follow From a Woman to a Leader, leave a quick rating or review, and share it with a woman in tech who needs to hear this. And I've got a powerful episode coming up next week I wanted to share with you. So next week I'm sitting with Betsy Pepine, and Betsy is a best-selling author. She's a serial entrepreneur and a founder of Pepine Realty, one of the top producing real estate companies in the US. And in our conversation, Betsy opens up about the boxes with trappers we trap ourselves in: titles, expectations, perfectionism, and how to finally break free. And her story is bold, deeply personal, and widely inspiring. And especially if you're ever felt stuck or wondering, is this really all there is? So don't forget to hit follow and make sure you don't miss this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.